All right. Okay. So my name is Laura Chesley, and the name of my speech is Instant Divorce, Mix In, and Stir Well. It was 1973, deep into the uproar and chaos of the sexual revolution. The winds had begun to shift concerning marriage and families, and it was time to hurl the historic chains of domination by men to the ground and take control of personal destiny. Equal rights was the call sign for every self-respecting feminist, and Jimmy was one of them. She gloried in having a name that belonged to men and enjoyed the discord between the name and her braless body. She wore the garment of self-fulfillment proudly, proclaiming her right to do as she pleased with her body and her life. The fact that she was married, had children, wasn't really an issue. She was determined to shed the oppression of the ages by doing just as she pleased. At that time, her marriage was unsatisfying and her husband boring. The excitement was gone, and what was left was comfortable but dull. She and her husband had moved to another state only a year earlier in search of greener grass and brighter rainbows, but what she found was the same monotony she'd left in the previous state. Thanks to Ronald Reagan, though, she was considering a quick divorce, severing the ties to her husband without any accusation of wrongdoing or fault, and moving on to those greener pastures she'd hoped to find a year before. Surely they were out there. Prior to 1969, divorce laws required that there be a reason for a marriage to be dissolved. There was a number of legal reasons allowed: adultery, abandonment, drug abuse, neglect, criminal conviction, or even mental illness, among others, and depending on the state the couple resided. Divorce was a civil process in court, similar to bringing a lawsuit against another person. It required proof and the determination to see it through to the end. It often wasn't pleasant, but it was an effective break on ending a relationship too quickly. In 1969, Ronald Reagan, a staunch social conservative, signed a no-fault divorce bill into law in the state of California. He was the first. Many states would soon follow in California's footsteps, to the unfortunate demise of many marriages. Within approximately 15 years, nearly every state had some form of no-fault divorce. There were many ideas behind no-fault divorce at the time, but one in particular was the main driver. No-fault divorce was meant to make the process of divorce easier and less hostile. If no one had to prove the other at fault, it would make the whole breakup less messy, less antagonistic, less expensive, and easier on everyone, including children. There was even the idea of a good divorce that floated around certain parts of society. Surely children would be better off with parents who were no longer angry, bitter people. No-fault divorce did not solve problems, but it did create some. Before no-fault laws, many women were awarded full custody of the children, ownership of the family home, and alimony. But with the push for equality, with the Equal Rights Amendment, newly minted no-fault divorce laws made those economic cushions less commonplace, and many newly single mothers found themselves living in poverty. The trend continues today. There are relatively new laws on the books in 3 states, Arizona, Arkansas, and Louisiana, that could begin a revolution to roll back the effects of no-fault divorce. They have created a legally distinct type of marriage called covenant marriage. In Arizona, the requirement is a statement that must contain 3 things: a specific prescribed statement acknowledging that marriage is a covenant between a man and a woman, proof that the couple has participated in premarital counseling, and the signatures of both people witnessed by a court clerk. Covenant marriages don't prevent divorce, but make the process more difficult, much like the laws before no fault. These new laws aren't perfect, but they are a step in the right direction. Families will benefit if divorce becomes a process that takes more effort and thoughtful consideration. I am the daughter of Jimmy. She was successful in getting her much-wanted, no-fault divorce from my father, but never found the greener pastures. The easy-come, easy-go siren call of marriage and divorce was a sham. There were no perfect men, or marriages for that matter, out there. She is currently married to her fifth husband, though this one will most likely be her last. The entitlement attitude has faded, replaced by marriage in its 16th year. Her life is filled with predictability and general comfort, the best to be had now that she's in her 70s. It's been a long road, this path that she's trod, in the search for herself. Unfortunately, her choices left broken hearts and homes in her wakes, but the tide has turned. She's learned and settled down. It appears she has finally come to understand that there are no shortcuts to finding happiness. Okay.
Excellent. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. And you were good. You were well within. You were under 6 minutes for sure. 5 something. So you were good. I'm like pushing right up to 7 on mine, and I talk fast.
Well, you get nervous, you know.
I know, exactly. You want to get everything in, so.
I know. So do you have any questions for me, or?
Well, I do have a couple of questions. So I saw a research study that was done by Professor Justin Walfers, and he's from Stanford University, and he said that in a study that they found no-fault divorce is actually providing safety to the pressures of family life. And if you're looking for the smoking gun to explain the decline in the traditional American family, it is not no-fault divorce laws. He said rather than looking on them as the cause of family life, these laws may actually provide a safety valve for the pressures of family life. And so that's a research study he had done. So I guess how do you think no-fault divorce has really affected family, traditional family in general?
Well, I think, so this comes from personal experience. I lived it as a child, and I think that no-fault divorce gave my parents an out, and in particular my mother, who was totally wrapped up in being a feminist and being, finding herself and finding that perfect whatever out there that wasn't out there. I think that it gives us too easy of an out. I think I read that study that you cited, but I don't remember seeing that. You know, so studies can be wrong and research can be bad, but I really do believe that no-fault divorce is a way to take the brakes off of a roller coaster ride when they get to the end that they decide they just want out. I mean, if you are required to actually go through a difficult process to end a marriage, then chances are you're going to take more time and invest more effort in figuring it out because the result of ending that marriage is unpleasant. So right. I think that no-fault divorce takes that away, and it makes it so that we get married one day and we get divorced the next, and no big deal. So.
Right, just makes it easy. So, and I understand that. I'm just curious about, as far as spousal violence goes, how, you know, that's very difficult sometimes. And there's been other studies that show that since no-fault divorce was passed, that violence against women has gone down, and that it's declined 12.8% since no-fault divorce has passed.
Well, actually, here's a really interesting thing, and I don't have the study in front of me, but in my family theories class, when we studied domestic violence, only 10% of all domestic violence takes place in a marriage. So 90% of all domestic violence takes place outside of marriage. We don't hear that. We don't talk about that. But it's between people who are either cohabiting or who are boyfriend-girlfriend. It's not in marriages. The majority of domestic violence does not take place in a marriage.
Interesting.
10%. That's a huge difference, and yet we don't hear that in our regular. When we hear about domestic violence, it's automatically assumed that it's taking place in a marriage, and that's not true.
Often, yeah, that's true. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, good. Great answers.
Great, thank you.
Well, good.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
So, my name is Kimmery Howard, and my title is Who's Watching You? So, driving down the road the other day, I found myself singing along to a popular country song by Rodney Atkins, I've Been Watching You. It went something like this. I've been watching you, Dad. Ain't that cool? I'm your buckaroo. I want to be like you. I want to do everything you do, so I've been watching you. It reminded me of a while back. I peered in to check on my daughter playing with some friends, and it was like looking into a mirror. I had a smile, and I had to stand there for a minute and watch. She was mimicking me in words and in behaviors. Luckily, it was not horrifying, though. How many of us have seen our little ones having a pretend tea party with their stuffed animals? Did we see ourselves in their words and their interactions? It's true. Little eyes are peering and little ears are listening, even when we aren't aware of it. In his book, The 10 Basic Principles of Good Parenting, Dr. Lawrence Steinberg said, you are on the stage all the time, and your children are in the audience, right there in the front row in the orchestra section. As parents, a parent's example is one of the single most influential attributes of parenting. Kids learn almost everything they say and do by modeling. It's true that children can learn from other people, family members, friends, TV characters, and movie characters. However, parents are watched more closely than anyone else. Parents are the prime examples and have a substantial influence on them, their behavior, and their futures. Children learn almost every interpersonal activity and interaction by modeling parents, and they are the primary models. Parents are not always aware of their influence and example that they communicate with their children through their behavior. It has been said that a child will watch what parents do far more than they will hear what they say. Children learn how to live by the way parents live far more than by the words they speak. There are some that will say parents don't really matter, that parental relationships can create memories and emotions, but they don't have much effect on how a child turns out. In their opinions, peers have the strongest influence on the child's future. However, research backs up my sentiments. Parents do matter. A parent's influence is substantial. Everything a parent does and everything they are can influence their children. But let's focus on some of the main behaviors we model for our children. First, physical activity. Research shows that 95% males and 95% females were influenced by their parents. Physical activity. Parents who engage in physical activity themselves and with their children model a healthy lifestyle that significantly influences the activity levels of their children. 2, diet and nutrition habits. The types of food parents eat themselves and keep in their homes influence the way their children learn to eat. 3, financial beliefs and habits. A child's most significant source of financial knowledge comes from their parents. Children look to their parents for financial guidance and direction. 4, religious attitudes and beliefs. In a study of 3,414 adolescents, the religious habits, attitudes, and church attendance of the adolescents were substantially correlated with their parents' religious practices. 5, academic and intellectual successes. There is ample evidence that a parent's attitude, example, and support for their children's learning influences their performance in school and on their eventual successes. In a No Child Left Behind Act, the Title I statute defines a parental involvement as participation of parents in a regular, two-way, meaningful communication involving students, academic learning, and other school activities. Even though I do not fully support all criteria of this act, there are aspects of it that I do deem beneficial. A synthesis of the research concluded that evidence is consistent, positive, and convincing. Parents have a major influence on their children's achievement in school and throughout life. When schools, families, and communities work together to support learning, children tend to do better in school, stay in school longer, and like school more. The focus is on the family. This focus is on the family and addresses one of the symptoms which can impact a child's future. These provisions reflect good practice in engaging families and helping to set an example, be involved, and educate their children. Because students do better when parents are actively involved in their education process, both at home and at school, this policy can help strengthen the family by helping parents understand the integral part they play and the influence they have in their child's education. According to a pro-family advocacy group and Worldwide Motherhood Initiative and Motherhood Manifesto, The Power of Mothers, A recent statement was levied by the U.S. Department of Justice that children do not need mothers and have no right to one. The power of mother makes this response. We, as the mothers, are the bringers of all life, and all mankind resides within our hands. For there even to be children on this earth, they need a mother first and foremost, to bring them into life. From there, it is the mother who supplies the very nourishment and strength that sustains that life. From the physical nutrition to the nurturing that builds that life, it is everywhere there is. Without the mother's influence for good, all humanity goes awry. Therefore, what can be done? Parents and mothers in particular have a tremendous responsibility to influence their children for good. Government needs to create policies that are family-focused and supports families and mothers in their responsibilities to be good influences. They must support the cause of parents, specifically motherhood, throughout the earth. Society must realize that without mothers shaping, teaching, and influencing children, it would fall apart within the next generation. That a mother must be honored for the noble sphere that she holds as she bears forth the nations of the earth in her irreplaceable role for all mankind. Families must be involved, speak out, and stand up for the rights and responsibilities of parents and mothers. Parents must engender greatness in the souls of their children that they love. Being a good example and living what one teaches should be a priority. Being a do-as-I-do parent is critical when it comes to setting an example for our children. The most effective way to raise good children is to be good parents. Children will learn from who we are and what we do. The life we live is the lesson we teach. Parents and mothers specifically can make a change in the world by making a change in their homes. Thank you.
Nice. You did it.
Yeah, that was so fast.
I was just looking at your time.
Did I do okay?
Yeah, just under 7 minutes, 6.5.
Good. That's where I have been. So as long as I didn't go over, I'm good. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do. So of all of the research that you did, what is the most important thing that a mother should take away in the fact that they should model for their children? What's the single most important aspect of what you talked about?
Like their attributes that they model? Is that what you're talking
well,
about?
what part of that is the most important part?
I think probably the main thing is that children learn from everything a mother does. So whether it's nonverbal or verbal, children are watching. And whether mothers think they're teaching the children a lesson or not, they are through their actions. So the life that parents live is the life lessons that the kids are taking away. So I think, the single most important thing to remember is that it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're having a bad day. Your kids are going to pick up on what you do. And for example, every morning I always say to my older girls who go off to school, I love you, have a great day, be safe. And my little 3-year-old is right behind me, love you, have a great day, be safe. He just mimics. And that's what kids do. They mimic everything parents do, whether it's good or bad. They learn and they listen and they mimic and they see even when we don't think they're seeing.
Right. So the most important thing is to remember that you're, like you said at the beginning, you're always on stage.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is you are on center stage and you don't know when they're watching and you don't know what they're hearing, but they hear and watch everything way more than we think they do.
Right. So my second question is, when you prepared your speech and your article, did you look at your own life differently? Did you change anything that you were doing specifically? Or did you find that you were kind of doing the right thing all along?
Well, I think that's a two-step answer. I think, yes, I looked at myself differently because I watched myself and I watched my children watch myself. And so I would listen, I think, a little more attentively to things they said. And then, so, most of it, luckily, I think they were doing pretty good in following me, and I was doing pretty good in what they were listening and hearing. But there were other times that just little simple things like, what kind of attitude is that? Or, you know, and they would say the same thing back to me. What kind of attitude is that? And so, you know, we don't think that they're hearing every little word that we say, whether it's to us, or I mean, whether it's to one child or to them. They're hearing it, and they throw that back at us. So it did make me be a little more careful in what I say and what I do, and then I watch a little more carefully their comments and their actions, because I do see myself in them. And luckily, most of the time it's good, but sometimes, ooh, I wish I could take that back. So
it's a little uncomfortable being a mom in that position.
yeah, it's true, but it's interesting as I observe kids in the neighborhood or nieces and nephews, and I see their parents in them so much. You know, the comments they make are comments I've heard their dad and mom make, and it's just so obvious, I think, when you look at it through this perspective, that that's exactly what's happening. You know, they are mimicking everything they learn.
Right. Right.
So
Good. Thank you. Thank you for answering
thank
the questions.
Thank you for your questions.
Okay. I think you can stop the broadcast now.